Right, before we begin, can I get a mic check from somebody who's joined remotely to let us know that our audio is coming through?
The audio sounds good to me.
And you sound good to me, Scott. Nice to hear you.
Thank you. Good to hear you.
All right. Well, welcome to TVR Working Group at IETF 122. Importantly, for those who are presenting, we do have a working clicker, which may be the first time in a long time that I can say that in a working group meeting. So always forward progress. So a couple of things. This is the first, this is the first day, full day for IETF. A few note wells. Please understand if this is your first IETF that there are a variety of things that we try and keep front and center. In particular, that we are following processes and policies that are well documented within the IETF, and that these are well documented in our various BCP documents. Additionally, and importantly, we do have within the IETF conduct guidelines and code of conduct guidelines. In particular, we want to make sure that we are extending respect and courtesy always, and that we have impersonal discussions. We can disagree on technical ideas, and we can do so politely and productively. If you are in the room, please make sure that you have also joined the Meet Echo, either the full client or the online tool, and you can access the online tool from your phone. And please, if you come to the microphone, and certainly when we get through some of the presentations today, we will be soliciting input, join the queue on the Meet Echo tool in addition to coming up to the microphone. A few bits of agenda are everything that we are presenting today is and has been uploaded. All of the slides are present as well. Hopefully we know how to use Meet Echo. And I would ask that please go to the shared notepad and make sure that we are working with that. I know that Adam, our secretary, is also there, but this is a collaborative process. If we are able to get many note takers in, that makes sure that we have good notes. Even if you are not taking notes, if you have gone up to the queue or if you are participating in some way, go into the shared notepad and make sure that things are spelled right and things of that nature. The better the notes we have, the better for everyone. For the working group, we have a variety of documents that we are pursuing and deadlines or anticipated milestones associated with them. The use cases document has been published as an RFC. The requirements and data model and applicability statement are in various states of that, with the requirements that we're presenting today the furthest along or the furthest in maturity. And then once we get through this set, we will have further discussions around what do implementation and operational considerations look like for the work that we are doing. So as we said before, we do have the use cases published. We have adopted Alto exposure, as well as the schedule document and requirements. And then we have an additional personal draft on applicability, which will be a large part of what we discuss today. Before we, one last thing is then if we don't have a dedicated presentation for the Yang data model. Where we are now is we feel that data model is fairly mature, and we have requested a Yang doctor review for that document. So where we are, we have addressed comments and community feedback, and we are dependent on some other work that's going forward, and we are waiting for the review and we'll respond to it. That particular document has the 3 Yang modules that we've defined so far, which is schedule, TVR node, and overall topology. So that's where we are. Tony, anything else on the schedule? So that concludes roughly the 5-minute introduction. What we'd like to do now is talk a little bit about the requirements document, which we think is in good and mature shape. So I would invite Daniel to come on down and let's talk about requirements. Are you sharing? Can you stop sharing? It doesn't think I'm sharing either. Let's see. Let's try this one more time. There we go. From your selection. Pass slide control. Okay, with minor technical difficulty, I give you a clicker.
I have the power as well. Nice. Okay, excellent. Ah, and a laser pointer. Great. Well, I just wanted to give a quick shout out actually to Adam. I think it's about 4 a.m. at the moment. So well done for getting up. And thanks for all the support as well with the slides and agenda, etc. So yes, indeed, TVR requirements. Again, thank you to my fellow editors / authors and all the contributors. We recently posted a new version of the document. Actually, we kind of had two versions in the last sort of 3 months or so. So just a quick reminder of the incremental changes between the two documents. It's also worth noting that there are no sort of significant sort of substantive changes to the requirements. These are really about polishing the documents, improving it, kind of filling in some little gaps based on feedback that we've had, mostly on the list and occasionally sort of talking to people at the IETF as well. And it is nice to see that the document has been read by folks who aren't necessarily attending the TVR sessions. But I'll come on to that because I think we might want to encourage sort of some other reviews of the document from different working groups. So sort of the most recent version of the document, so we're now in sort of iteration 6, so that's 0.5. We added an introduction section. Yeah, that was kind of lacking. I think when you read the document so many times, you kind of have blindness to its structure. So we, now that we're having other people who aren't attending sort of the TVR session and haven't read some of the previous iterations of the document, kind of pointed out, well, actually, maybe an introduction would be nice. So yes, we've done that. We also expanded a couple of the sections where there's now potential development in other working groups. So think about sort of centralized and distributed approaches for using TVR work. I know that some folks have started to investigate some sort of protocol solutions. So they felt that maybe it's kind of useful to just kind of expand that, not hard requirements, but just kind of scoping how you might use this technology. We had some great feedback, name check for Ed here, in terms of how we structured the security discussion, maybe sort of adding some preamble, and that, oh, we've got a, sorry, Greg, I thought you had a mic there. You're standing in front of the mic, not behind it. I hope you brought enough drinks for everyone as well. We wanted the security section actually to be robust enough that it was useful. There are several hard requirements in the security, but we don't use a conformance language. So I suppose maybe hard might be a strong word. A strong suggestion that you might want to secure your network if you're using sort of time variant net networking aspects. The introduction actually to that section starts much earlier we kind of signpost this from the integrity discussion and robust security discussion, and then that leads into specific security considerations. What we don't do in the document is tell you how to kind of negate or mitigate some of these security concerns. And then in addition with this sort of new text, we also have squashed many bugs, fixed various grammar, and sort of try to make the document as readable as possible. I also had a review with a particular lens where I thought maybe we could kind of reduce the size of the document, but honestly, I found the document fairly efficient. There wasn't a lot of sort of bloated text, but if, as we kind of prepare for last call, someone wouldn't mind reading the document and just kind of maybe thinking in terms of, could we reduce text? Is there some duplication? How can we make this document sort of more efficient or lightweight? That would be really useful. So what next? Well, indeed, we feel as authors, contributors, that the document is in a good position. Clearly, we have the various Yang models that have been developed that address the requirements. Do we now finish/close the document and move into last call? Is there something else that maybe we've missed? It's not a criticism, but generally the reviews that we've had and comments are from people who have read the previous versions of the document. So if you haven't sort of read the document in detail, now is the time. It will be really useful to get sort of another perspective. Given that sort of TVR has technology that can be seeded for a variety of applications that are sort of potentially solution work is solved with other working groups, is it now a good time maybe to disseminate the draft in the other working groups? You know, that effectively it is stable, it's at a sort of a nice point in time. Why don't you have a read? And which working groups specifically? Well, ops clearly because we inherit / augment some of their data models, but there could be some protocol work where TVR is used as well for changing state in a particular device, physical or logical. There are numerous side meetings this week that talk about satellite technology, and clearly TVR has an applicable use case there as well. Cool, so it's not quite my last slide, but I think next steps, fairly obvious. We do have a vested interest in the applicability document, because I think that this is the document where we can really kind of ascertain whether or not the requirements have been addressed in the solution, and then with the solution, what is the YANG code, what are the sort of the parameters, the attributes, how do you instantiate for a particular use case, and that's kind of the next discussion. Well, the use cases are sort of legion, but you know, what should the priority be? And do I have a next slide, or is that it? Oh no, that may be it. So, and what did the chairs think?
Well, so a few things. One, with chair hat on, I think that requesting working group last call on the mailing list, it sounds like something that we should be doing now, because what I'm hearing is there is no.
I lost my lanyard. Sorry. I'll get another one on this.
So what we're saying is that there are no known remaining changes to the document.
Correct.
The issue, there are no issues in the GitHub. What I would ask here, just in the room or online, if anyone has read the document and believes that there are additional changes but not has otherwise addressed them, would anyone like to talk about them or mention them now? Okay, so that sounds to me like we should take this to the mailing list for last call. Tony?
Ship it already.
With chair hat off, I do have a question, which is, you mentioned some relationship of the requirements and the applicability document. Is the concern there that a scrub of the requirements is given by the applicability document? Is there a dependency there?
No, I think it's in terms of time. Ooh, to overutilize the term.
Resources.
Yeah. The fact that we've got sort of contributors that are working both the requirements document and the applicability, we can sort of push the requirements off the plate. We can focus more time on applicability.
Okay. No, that makes sense.
Right.
Thank you so much. All right. So next after requirements is TVR exposure. This document is, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see, please go ahead.
This is Yingzhen from FutureWay. So my question about the requirement document is, do we want to last call this one first or the YANG module first? We probably want to do this one first, right? So that one we already requested YANG doctor review, that can go in parallel. But
Yes.
the last call of the YANG module should go after the requirement document. Yeah. Thank you.
So just to the back, so yes, I think that we can probably do the last call on the requirements document, but if anyone feels differently, please let us know. Okay. All right, thank you. And sorry that I did not see you. All right, our next presentation is our most recently working group adopted document on Alto exposure. Just a moment to get this changed. You have control.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. This is Luis from Telefonica. I will present the latest updates on this draft. So the draft was adopted in December last year. What we will see here today is version 01, which has been released in March. So basically, this is a maintenance version. We include in this version the reporting of the implementation status. I will go through it in the next slide. And also, we have included in the document the open issues that were raised during the adoption process, so that we can have track of them. I will propose also some ideas how to solve them, and the idea would be in version 02 to cover all of them. So regarding the implementation status, the scenario that was proposed in the draft has been implemented in order to validate this idea of having an off-path mechanism for advertising the TVR information to applications that could consume that information, being those applications internal or external to the operator that has, let's say, generating this variant routing information. Just as a reminder of the scenario, what we were proposing was an operational situation where either from an operator perspective, we need to upgrade some nodes in terms of software, hardware, or whatever, so we can anticipate what will be the changes in the topology, so that we can generate this variant routing information and then advertise into those applications to consume it. So in the implementation status, we developed different modules, four of them basically. One module which basically collect from the network engineer what would be the changes in the topology, so the network engineer can basically scroll through some menus and select what would be the changes. Then a second module that was in the scenario that we depicted in the document was acting as a kind of network digital twin, but essentially it's a tool that can anticipate what could be the impacts of those changes in terms of KPIs, so how the network will change, and so how will serve as a criteria for the network engineer to decide if we can go on with the changes or not. These two models that I have referred to were developed by a Lighthouse, which is a software company. And then we developed two additional ones. One called Change Scheduler, that will be the one basically managing the workflow and interacting with the digital twin, and later on with the network controller for implementing the changes. And what we call Alto Cost Calendar, which basically is an Alto server implementing this cost calendar functionality from Alto. Well, this was basically the implementation. The modules has been released as an open source and available in the GitHub from the optimized project. That was the project somehow behind which we developed all of this. And a demo is also available, so the ones interested can check it. The demo was done with Alto in mind, but as we will see later on in the comments, so the idea here would be to make this generic, not Alto specific. Okay, so any other off-path solution would be equally valid for this. So the open issues. So during the adoption process, there were a number of comments. Some comments just are simply clarification, so this will be done in the mailing list, but some others implies changes in the document, and these are the ones that are collected now in the version 01 and basically would motivate changes in version 02. The first issue was raised by Joel, and the idea was to make the draft less Alto specific. So here the proposal is to basically to change the orientation of the document and make more emphasis on the path capabilities and just keeping Alto as a potential way of doing that. So this is the proposition. The second issue was from Penliu about adding clarification on the on-path and off-path possibilities, let's say. So this will also incorporate it. So we will introduce more details on that, so that hopefully can make more evident the differences on the approaches. The third issue was about clarification on the TVR information to be exposed. This was raised by Ji Dong, and the idea is in line with the issue number 1 to make it less Alto specific, basically to comment this from the perspective of what would be the generic information to be exposed. Essentially would be the TVR young model information, and maybe adding as a kind of an appendix the particularities for Alto. And the last issue 4 was raised again by Ji Dong about the applicability of Alto-based information. And and here the proposal is to add an example of what applications could consume the information. Maybe in summary, elaborating a little bit more the scenario, the case. So I said version 02 is the target for implementing all these changes, and I'm basically trying to see if they all are solved satisfactorily for those that commented.
Okay, and just on the previous slide, with chair hat on, if we look at issue number 1, and I know there's a question here, should we change the name of this draft and not have it be Alto? I'd like just to have just a moment more on that. How would we change this Alto draft to not be Alto?
We can refer to off-path. In fact, in one of my next slides was raised this point, so we need probably to change the name, and probably we can just simply call it TVR exposure or TVR off-path exposure or something like that.
Okay. Okay. So we'll talk about it on the next slide.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And the next one or the final one, so is put here. So for implementing the changes, then the proposed new structure of the document, and probably we will need more iterations and in the mailing list and so, but the initial idea would be to, for sure, keep the introduction to a second section with on-path versus off-path mechanisms for TVR, so that it's clear, can make clear, let's say, the differences between the two approaches. Then probably ways of, third section on ways of retrieving the scheduled topological changes for off-path solutions. So basically, what could be the sources of information, routing protocols, BGP, whatever, so, or even taking from the controller. So that would be somehow the southbound interface of this off-path solution. The fourth section would be about mechanisms for exposing the TVR information. So what would be, let's say, the northbound interface of that component that would expose. Alto clearly will be an option, but we need to consider more options for making the draft Alto agnostic, let's say. And here maybe a possibility would be to refer to the network controller that is now depicted in the applicability draft. So we suppose that network controller to be the one exposing the information, so maybe we can present it as another alternative, let's say. And then the security considerations for sure. And maybe in the annexes, moving more details about Alto, just for providing the details if the working group thinks that is necessary to do so. And yeah, the last question is, oh no, okay. The question is, now in the draft, there are other sections like the implementation status and identify gaps. So I'm not sure it should remain in the document or should be removed finally. The implementation status probably could be removed because it's just a reference for something that has been done with a particular solution. Regarding the gaps, probably we can take the gaps and trying to move the gaps to other, basically dropping the questions in the mailing list and trying to understand how impacting the other documents. For instance, before we were talking about the YAM module, here in this particular case, something that we identified as a gap would be the case that in the YAM module now, we are only considering nodes and links, and probably we need to consider groupings of links that could be the equivalent to the cards. So if we do something, changing the software of a card or whatever, instead of going one by one on the ports, maybe just to consider the card as a grouping of ports, details that maybe can be moved to other documents.
So I do have, so then my question in this formulation is, as I understand it, the proposal would be to create a new document, which is off-path solutions for TVR. And the assumption would be that there is enough commonality of off-path solutions that making an Alto section versus other sections is still within a framework of how you share off-path information.
Correct. Yeah.
I guess what I would ask here is, do we intuitively agree with that? Do we think that there is enough commonality and off-path solution sharing that it would be worth having a single document with carve-outs for individual mechanisms? Does anyone have an opinion on that? On-path or off-path opinion? Tony?
I like generalization.
Yep. Does anyone have an objection to an Alto document that is reformulated as an off-path document with an Alto section? Okay. Does anyone have a strong preference? It's quite, okay. Daniel. Well, I know you're not Daniel.
I'm not Daniel.
Daniel's next in the queue, but why don't you go ahead briefly
Okay.
without the queue, and then we'll go
Rick
to Daniel.
Taylor, answering that question, I prefer off-path with the subsection for alto because there are other off-path mechanisms that don't use alto but are still off-path.
And we believe fall within a common umbrella of off-path approaches.
Yes.
Hi, Dan. Did we get to the last bullet? Have you asked that question yet? Because that's my question. I have a comment for that.
So what to do with the other two sections, you mean?
Yeah. Are you assuming this document continues and goes through last call, IESG review, etc., hits the RFC editors, will you remove the implementation status in the appendix, or are you planning to keep it?
I don't have a clear idea. I don't have a clear idea, to be honest.
Yeah.
So we can keep it as a reference, or maybe we can document in the wiki, or I don't know.
So the follow-up question was, the document contains some nice kind of references to your source code, sort of some of the open source project. What would be really useful as well is maybe some links to any papers that kind of show sort of the cookbook that you've got for the other components and how you built the implementation and results as well. Now, I know that the IETF isn't about generally publishing academic material, but you've already got it, you've already got quite a lot of useful info in the document anyway. And if that section is removed before publication, it's not like we're kind of spamming and having a lot of ancillary information, but it's useful for anyone who reads a document now.
Okay, I can anticipate there will be a deliverable explaining all of this with all the details, screenshots, and these kind of things. Yeah, maybe we can, or either keep in the document or maybe document it in the wiki or whatever thing that the chairs think that it's more convenient to do so.
Okay, and final question. Final question. Do you think, I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot here, Lewis, but I'll ask you anyway in front of all these people as witnesses and archived. Do you think the work that we're doing in TVR is something that might be considered for, say, an open source sort of SDN controller / orchestrator in, say, an organization like Etsy?
Well, not sure if in Etsy in particular, but yeah, so as open source for sure. I mean, somehow it's a way of validating the usefulness of all this. So my quick answer would be yes.
Okay, great, thanks.
Just one follow-up comment about implementation status and pointers. Because implementations change and implementation status changes, work that comes out of the RFC, even if it's an appendix, it should be long-lived. So my only comment would be to prefer things that would be long-lived in the RFC, and things that are short-lived may be moved out to references, which whose location can be long-lived.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it. So next steps will be to prepare the version for sure. Okay, I think I added the point about the title, but yeah, was one of the next steps as well to reconsider the title of the document. I'm not sure it was around here, but anyway, yeah, probably we need to change the title of the document for generalizing it, but I'm not sure if this implies to generate a 0.0 version of a new document, or we can keep on this and maybe just simply changing the name.
Can we just rename? I think we can just rename.
Okay.
We'll double check.
But the identifier of the document, the draft, IETF, blah, 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 will keep with Alto as a reference, but we can rename the document.
So yes, but Chair had on, we would take that to the mailing list just to make sure. And then if there are no strong objections, then we would proceed with the rename.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great. Our next presentation is going to be on TVR applicability. We do have a larger block of time devoted to this, and the reason for that is there's been a significant amount of comments related to the scope of the applicability document. We had talked before as to whether we wanted a single applicability document with multiple sections or multiple applicability documents. And so I know we have an expanded discussion here, but my ask is that we are interactive in this part of the working group. I think that as we ask questions, we should make sure we're coming to the mic because we will be capturing the notes from this discussion in Notepad and then using that to seed some mailing list discussion thereafter. So I would ask that this part of the discussion be a little more interactive as we walk through the various applicability statements. All right, thank you. And let me pick one thing, and you should have control.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Li Zhang from Huawei. I will present the TVR applicability draft on behalf of the list of authors and contributors. Okay, so what's new in this version? 02, we added a new use case as the example of this applicability draft, which is dynamic reachability, and we updated the time synchronization clause to cover this different kind of use cases. And we also provide a more detailed discussion to the security considerations. And in the final, we also do some editorial changes. So currently, we have two use cases for the example of applicability draft. One is the title network, and another is a dynamic reachability network. So there is a question that we need feedback from the working group is these two use cases are sufficient for the applicability draft. Okay.
So
yeah.
Sorry, trying to find my hand. So the question that is posed here, is it sufficient to consider these two cases in the applicability draft? Sufficient, there are two ways that I've interpreted that question. One is, do we believe that they are distinct use cases, that the dynamic reachability example is not modelable in a title network example and vice versa? Do you believe that they are distinct use cases, you cannot model one with the other?
Yes, I think that it is different.
Then the second sort of sufficiency question would be, do we believe that these two use cases, one or the other, are therefore able to model any of our other use cases? And maybe that would be a question out to the working group is title and dynamic reachability really the two? And if we cover those, we have large coverage over the TVR use cases from our first RFC. Or might there be a third that we should consider? And if so, what should we consider? This is the interactive part. Oh, Daniel, please.
Hi, Dan again. So I'm kind of torn here because on one hand, I'd love to see several use cases with examples. And I'd also kind of like to state at this point that I think this document needs to go into a lot of detail about how the Yang is used. I mean, you read several other sort of documents in other working groups and they just talk about, this is the value, or this is the parameter or the attribute. What we need to do is say, okay, here is the use case. This is the Yang, the snippet, the way that you potentially encode what you're trying to do. This is the parameter you actually need, and this is the outcome. So it's kind of everything that you would potentially see over the wire. And that's, in the previous discussions we've had, that's why we want to kind of organize this hackathon. So we could actually sort of generate information examples that would directly feed into the document, or at least be linked from the document at some point. If you want to see sort of the Yang models, because it's not just our Yang model, but and some ancillary Yang as well, you would have JSON examples. Those could be easily archived. and people then get to see who maybe aren't implementing themselves what it looks like over a wire. So going back to my original point, the problem is if we've got 4 or 5 of these use cases, that generates a huge amount of work. And as you know, my vested interest here is don't have a huge amount of time, as much as I would like to do, to focus on TVR. So my personal opinion, completely biased, is that I'd like to kind of restrict the number of use cases just so we can kind of implement and go deep and document well, rather than having 4 or 5 use cases and then just sort of having a superficial amount of information.
No, fair and fair points, agreed. Tony?
Yeah, we'll echo that. I agree we need to go deep. I'm not sure I agree that we want to not cover all the use cases that are in the use case RFC. We've documented a bunch of stuff. We kind of owe people something that says, here's how you use what we've produced. Okay, and yes, I'm sorry to say that it needs to be very explicit. It needs to be down to a cookbook, and it really needs to cover everything that we've been talking about. So I realize that's a lot of work, but it's kind of got to get done.
So then what I would like to do is, using the sort of management tool here, is delegate some of that work. So if we've got authors and contributors in the document, let's try to agree sort of offline at some point, a couple of individuals assigned to each of the use cases, and then sort of do this with the economy of scale. So just to make that clear, so we have other contributions and partners who are able to cover Tony's wish list of use cases.
Rick Taylor. I'm struggling a little bit with this document, not because it's unreadable and not because it's well thought out. I don't know how you can write an applicability, given we already have a use cases document, RFC, when we haven't got the tools and techniques to be applied. The applicability, in my mind, it might be my misunderstanding of what an applicability document is for, should tell me as a implementer of TVR techniques how to apply the techniques which are available to me to the use cases. What techniques? What new magic TVR stuff are we applying? Or are we just talking about how to do routing with a clock?
We're talking about the Yang model. How do you use the Yang model?
Okay.
Okay. You've got this model. What are we doing with it? How did it solve, say, the tidal network?
Okay. So perhaps I have misunderstood the purpose. So if you therefore have enough coverage of the members of that Yang model for your use cases, then you have described the applicability, because you've said this feature of the Yang model solves this problem in this use case. And you can do that coverage map, and that will tell you whether you've got sufficient use cases.
And just to jump in on that, I think that is the hope, right? We have a set of use cases. We worked hard to make sure that those use cases were representative and non-overlapping.
Yeah.
We have a set of candidate Yang models, and the question really is, they are necessary, but are they sufficient? And if we do the mapping through applicability, the deep dive across those use cases, that will tell us whether that information is sufficient. And if not, then what additional models need to be brought up so that we could close that document. I think that is the strategy going forward.
So my pushback on that would be, you're using the applicability document to test the coverage of your Yang models against your use cases. And I sort of think you ought to do the test first and then write the applicability document. Using a document as a test seems to be an arduous, hard thing to do. And the poor author team are doing a lot of churn.
It's a test document.
It's not a test document, it's a specification.
Okay, go ahead.
So I'd like to directly respond to Rick on that, and I agree, but it's an iterative process. So what's happening, at least with sort of some of our interest in TVR, is that I'm having to handcraft essentially the Yang and then create the JSON manually, and I'm kind of too lazy to write a tool to do that. So it's just as easy to kind of copy and paste and change the values myself. But as we kind of work through the Yang and generate sort of these JSON examples, that then feeds into the document. So I think what's going to happen is that we'll go through several iterations with these activities working in parallel. But it kind of gets back to a point that I made earlier to Lewis. It will be really cool if we had, say, an SDN controller, something like Teraflow Etsy, Teraflow SDN, the TFS, that implements the Yang models, because gosh, that would save hours of sort of writing and generating the examples. So that kind of addresses some of your comment as well. Where are the tools? What's the code, the running code that would allow me to kind of use the TVR technology? Well, that is an open source project, and maybe there are other open source projects that could kind of implement TVR. But what I don't think this applicability document should do is kind of go beyond almost the state of the art and start talking about maybe some other protocol mechanisms that would be really cool in a what if scenario. And so we're in agreement there as well. So let's kind of keep things practical and sensible and address the use cases that are in our RFC, and not go beyond, not get too complex, because then we're not going to be able to finish the document.
No, that makes great sense to me. So oh, go ahead, Rick.
Can I ask a follow-on question to Dan? I can't promise an open source orchestration solution, but if a closed source orchestrator was to implement these Yang models and provide public feedback, would that be constructive? I shall take that on advisement.
So to the question at hand for this one slide,
Yeah.
is it sufficient to consider these two cases in this document? Based on this discussion, the sense is no, that we would like all of the use cases from our use case document to be represented here. And we feel there's enough commonality to pull them within a single document and have them treated separately, similar to the Alto discussion we just had. Is there any dissent to that summary, just to capture? Okay.
Okay, thank you for the efficient discussion. Yes, I think we still need a lot of work to be done, and welcome for contributors to contribute more content for this draft. Okay, and I will also briefly introduce the current version of this draft. And so the first question is when the TVR model is applicable. We analyze the different combination of the schedule generation manner and the schedule execution manner, and the result is when the schedule is generated in a centralized manner and executed in the distributed manner, which means the schedules are generated in the managing devices and distributed to the manager devices for executing, then the TVR model is applicable. So the second question is when the TVR model is applicable, how to deliver the Yang model. So generally speaking, the Yang-based management protocols includes the netconf and the restconf. We also generally detailed summaries the features of netconf and the restconf, and give suggestions for different scenarios when the netconf is applicable and when the restconf is applicable.
So, sorry,
Yeah.
Just with chair hat off, I do have a question both here and just backing up a slide. If we look at netconf and restconf, and also in the conf category, we have core conf. And so my question here is part of this model also looking at the like IoT devices that are rarely online or come online at particular scheduled times, where we have sort of a smaller, more compact encoding like we also see with core conf. So that's an observation. My question is, have you considered core conf as a delivery mechanism?
Okay, we will consider it. We didn't consider it in this version. Yes. Okay.
And then another, if we just go back one slide.
Yes.
So TVR Yang, the model is not applicable, or the distribution of the model is not applicable. I want to make sure I understand the no's and the yeses here.
I think the your model is for the distribution. So I think only when the schedule generation and the schedule execution is in different devices, your model is applicable.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that answer. Could you repeat what you mean by in a centralized execution model that the TVR Yang is not applicable? First row.
Centralized if the schedule is generated in a centralized manner and also executed in a centralized manner, there is no need to deliver the YAML model. It can just some behaviors inside a device. So
so that's, you're assuming that the centralized generator is the same device as the centralized executor.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
I can see use cases where the generator is different from the executor.
Yeah, there is a use case when maybe they are different.
So does that
devices.
mean distributed then?
Yes, then need to
Right.
distribute. Yes.
This is Yingzhen. So for the centralized mode, do you mean you have a controller that you don't need the YAML model? We do have the topology, the TVR topology YAML model that's meant to be used by a controller.
So you mean the centralized generation or centralized execution?
What do you mean by centralized generalization?
This is
generation.
defined in requirements draft. Yeah, centralized generation means the schedule maybe, for example, only some centralized device have the capability to predict this topology changes or have the capability to make some interface or node behavioral decisions. So
Okay.
only the centralized.
If that's the case, that
Yeah.
can be, that schedule can use the TVR topology module. That's used by a controller to describe the schedule. So basically, we have a device model that's for a specific node. Say, oh, okay, I have this schedule, and my interface on whatever may go down. And we also have a module for controller that describes the whole network. Look at the whole network. So, okay, router A may do something at this schedule, router B may do something at another schedule. So that's the topology module. So we do have, that's why we have 3 different modules in the draft.
Okay, I can say more detail is your model drafts and to see whether this draft covered all the cases.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for that discussion, because I do think that while we have 3 approaches or rows here, I think to Rick's point as well, centralized generation and centralized execution doesn't mean that it's the same thing, and there might need to be distribution between. Similarly, distributed generation and distributed execution may also have an N of M mechanism to it. So we may wind up with more options here than we have otherwise.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Follow-on question. If the TVR Yang is not applicable, what should you do? Is that, and I haven't read this document recently, is that covered?
I'm not yet convinced that it's not applicable.
And that's where I'm going as well. I mean, you may not actually ingest the raw yang, but understanding what's in that yang model and it influencing how you implement whatever it is you implement is still valuable and therefore applicable.
Let's continue. The time synchronization considerations. Generally speaking, the time synchronization mechanisms can be divided into hardware-based time synchronization and software-based time synchronization. For each category, we post two examples. For the hardware is GPS and PTP. For GPS is realize the time synchronization by receive the satellite signals, and it is suitable for large scale and networks with not reliable links, because it doesn't rely on the synchronization among different network nodes. And for the PTP is a time synchronization mechanism which based on IEEE 5088, and it is more suitable for small scale, but have a very high precision requirements on the time synchronization. And for the software based time synchronization, it usually have lower precision compared to the hardware-based time synchronization. The typical case are the NTP and SNTP. The SNTP is requires less resources, so it is useful for some network with limited resources. Yeah.
Daniel?
Yeah.
So this week we've got the tip-top working group. Is it a research group? I guess it's a working group. Wow. Okay. So deep space networking is sort of big market opportunity. That would be an interesting near space. Being corrected. That would be another sort of time synchronization consideration, right? I mean, we're not dealing with potentially seconds or nanoseconds, etc. We're dealing with days, weeks, months, and deep space years. But we send Rick to Mars first, actually. So I don't know if the tip-top guys are following. I suppose some people are kind of active in both working groups. Is there maybe a use case? I mean, is it applicable for what's being discussed in tip-top, and should we have that as a consideration in this?
Ed with chair hat off. There may be some relativistic concerns. We talked a little bit about relativity at the last TVR working group meeting. Lunar time lags by about, is it 50 microseconds a day? So if there needs to be time synchronization at higher precisions, we will need to understand in some way these reference frames for time. And I don't know the extent to which we need to do that at these larger scales of microseconds and beyond. But that might be one area of overlap. Rick?
Okay.
Sorry,
Mars?
Quick message from Mars. It'll arrive in 43 minutes. My phone just crashed. Meet Echo. I think the time problems with interplanetary distances and interplanetary bodies and relativity will need to be solved for the underlying systems that are happening, that it can be classed under hardware-based time synchronization as currently exists, because the equivalent of lunar GPS will exist before TVR needs to worry about it. So I don't think this document needs to go there. it's covered under there'll be some hardware system that can be used. And from that, you can bootstrap the software.
And we will squeeze, I know we're getting close to the end of the meeting, but Greg?
Hi, Greg Mirsky, Ericsson. One question I think that would be helpful to clarify here is which plane the clock synchronization is essential and critical. Is it the control plane or is it a data plane?
Generally, it's the control plane.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that might help to really select which method is more useful. Thank you.
Okay.
It is more comment also regarding GPS. So probably would be more convenient to use GNSS. So for making general solution, not particular to GPS, but whatever satellite solution.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay. Okay. GPS is just a common definition for the satellite-based position system. Okay. This is not only means to GPS. Okay. I can provide more clarification for this. Okay. So within a network, there is not only one schedule. So we need to maintain a schedule database to manage different schedules. So we define a schedule database. We write the schedule database considerations, and for the schedule database, it should have a schedule structure, which according to the TVR model, we should at least have 4 types of schedule entries. There are node, power, schedule entry, interface schedule entry, and nodes schedule entry, and links schedule entry. The first 2 are for the TVR node YAM model, and the last 2 are for the TVR topology YAM model. And also we provide some requirements for the schedule database operation. And okay, I think they are very detailed. And next slide. Okay, for the operational considerations for this part, we haven't finished this part, but we list some aspects that we need to consider in the future, including the coordinated network events and the accurate schedule paths and timestamp data model, and also the different schedule actions for different kind of schedules. Okay, for the schedule considerations, this part provides some possible measures to mitigate the security challenges identified in the requirements draft. And this part will keep synchronization with the requirements draft. Okay. And for the next step, okay, and I think the first question has been fully discussed. We will add more cases, and we also need to optimize the operational consideration costs, and we also welcome contributions from different contributors because it really big work. And the last one is will the working group to consider adopt this document? Okay.
So again, with chair hat on, is based on the discussions we've had here, it sounds to me that applicability and across the use cases is something we want to see. Is there a concern right now about this document as it would grow to the full set of use cases being adopted in this working group? All right. So that could kick off mailing list activity. What I would like to say is we are at time. Thank you so much for the participation. There's an awful lot to talk about, and we will see you in Madrid.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Quite a lot.
Yes.
Yes, and I'll try and gather some folks. So no Slack.
Slack is on my other computer.
Right, 6:30 registration desk.
That doesn't work.
We'll do it. We'll be there. Well, however, maybe if you wouldn't mind, posting that to some knowledge, because I think something that came out of here, we were going to try and take our notes and get that out to the